In 1910, the scientific period for cattle breeding began. This was spearheaded by the work done at Hope under the leadership of the then Director of Agriculture, Mr. H. Cousins. Mr. Cousins served for 24 years and was the mentor of Dr. T.P. Leckie, who was the father of the local cattle breeds of Jamaica. Today, we meet Dr. Karl Wellington, a geneticist tied to Jamaica's livestock, specifically cattle breeding, for over 40 years. Dr. Wellington spent years being guided by the late Dr. T.P. Leckie. His passion for the area continues despite his heartbreak of the present status of cattle in Jamaica.
There are very few people who are interested in that history. In fact, the modern period of cattle breeding in Jamaica started about 1910, when the then Director of Agriculture, Mr. H. Cousins, imported animals into Jamaica for experimental purposes. And these experimental animals proved that our tropical conditions were inimical to their production at the levels which they did in the temperate countries. So the work which began in 1910 was continued, and up to the mid-1940s, animals were imported, crossbreeding was done, measurements were taken. And most of this work was concentrated at Hope, which was a combination of the Hope Agricultural Station and the Jamaica School of Agriculture. That work resulted in the development of what we have come to know as the Jamaica Hope breed. That was the dairy breed. Similar work was done with beef cattle, and the Jamaica Red Pole and the Jamaica Brahmans and the Jamaica Black were also created. There are not many people in Jamaica who know of this or care about it, because at the time there was, in combination to the cattle breeding work, the introduction of pasture work. And Mr. Sam Mota, who was legendary, or grassland man, did a lot of work here. And so the feeding of the animals and the breeding of the animals, there was a combination there. And we had a very useful program going of development in livestock, which involved many private farmers. In 1952, we had established the Jamaica Hope, Jamaica Red Pole, and the Jamaica Brahmans. In 1954, the Jamaica Black. By 1962, we gained independence. And all of this work that I mentioned was being done under the colonial administration. And when we gained independence, we virtually threw away the baby with the bathwater. In the early 1940s, as a 4-H clubite, I was a member of a goat project and a cattle project. My first animal was a goat purchased for 2 shillings and 6 pence. And my first heifer was purchased for 5 guineas. If anybody understands today what those currency mean, they were very reasonable priced animals at the time. And I learned about cattle. I was milking animals and taking the milk to school, to the milk truck before I went to school and things like this. Animal genetics was in its early days of development when persons like T.P. Leckie studied at Edinburgh University. And he was one of my mentors. The course in animal genetics is really one which shows it is contemporary with human genetics. And the genetics is really the mathematics of a half. It is really saying that this animal is half of his mother and half of his father. And the relationship that we have with animals are always halved with each generation. So the productive animals, indeed its productivity, depends on its genetic background, and you can get the production coming out of it by the nutrition or the environment, the genetics on the one hand and the environment on the other. So it is really the product of the genes that is in the animal and the feed. In fact, there's a saying that half the breeding goes in through the mouth, because the animal must be fed in order to express its food potential. Now, you're asking about the field of animal husbandry, which has many other aspects. And at the School of Agriculture, for example, I did about 17 different courses. All these courses impacted upon the production of the animals. For example, in the cattle facilities that are being presented, you need to have your milking parlor, milking machines, gates, and the sanitation of the facilities in order to produce clean milk, for example. The bacterial count in the milk, one has to be able to manage that so that it does not get out of proportion and the milk will spoil and becomes unacceptable for human consumption. There are many people, and I think a lot of Jamaicans, who think that rearing beef cattle or producing beef is just putting a bull and some cows in a pasture and closing the gate and go away. Unfortunately, it's not so. There's a lot of work and attention has to be placed to details. You saw these animals here today. Every calf born in this herd, we have a record of the dam and sire, the mother and the father. And you're able to trace this generation after generation so that you do not have matings that are incestuous, right? That is, mating of animals that are too closely related. In the development of the local cattle breeds has got international recognition. But the numbers of animals which we have is now getting to the stage where survival is threatened. If we continue the downward trend, downward path with respect to numbers, then we will not be able to maintain the herds that are now in the island. We have almost passed the point in respect of the Jamaica Black of recovery, because the number of family lines are now too close for survival. The Jamaica Red Pole and the Brahmans probably will, if we halt the decline and get back to the stage that we were before. The Jamaica Hope is threatened because there is a lot of vacillation. If people would unite and get together and continue the genetic work which has been done over the last 100 years, then we might be able to rescue that situation. And we need to include a larger number of farmers.